All right, good morning, everybody. We'll get started on today's workshop. The first part will be on the deep dive to ICM. Ben's going to be late, and I see we've got Jennifer online and Tipper. So morning. And
Morning.
We'll get Greg to do the kitty care, and then we'll get into infrastructure with Ruben and Brendan. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Good morning, everyone. I'll start with our karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ke uta, kia mā taratara ke tai, e hi aki ana te atakura, e tio, e huka, e hohu, te hei, Māori ora.
Thank you, Greg. There's different amounts of slides to each pack, so hopefully we can keep them to the end of the slide pack and then start asking questions. But if it's desperate that we need to, we can open it up. But we'll just try and, I think you guys got about 4 slides or something.
So through you, so I'll provide some introductions.
Yep. Okay.
For infrastructure as well, but I've got some opening comments as well.
Okay. Or you start then, Greg.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. All right. Yeah. So this is our deep dive into ICM, and it's one of several that I know the council have been running through in different committees and through finance and performance. So we've got a number of staff that will be joining us today, both in the chambers and online, and I'll introduce those staff as we go through. So I'll provide some opening comments, but I don't want to really linger at the directorate level because I guess the whole point of the session is to really dive into the activities. And our activities are all very different in terms of what we do and how we receive funding. This is a session that's intended to meet the needs of both the Integrated Catchment Management Committee and the Finance and Performance Committee. So I guess two slightly different lenses to look across our business, but a lot of the same people and a lot of the same information as well. I do need to acknowledge that from an ICMC point of view, we have undertaken some induction work with you earlier in the year. And so the intent of the session isn't to duplicate this. It's really just to allow a bit of a deeper dive into our activities and the funding and what we undertake. We have 2 hours for ICMC, and then I think we'll be moving on to RTC. And so during that time, effectively, that gives us about 30 minutes for each business area. So infrastructure, catchment and river management, biosecurity and biodiversity, and then resilience and emergency management. And what we'll do is each of my managers will come up and provide an overview of why we do what we do, so strategy and planning, a breakdown of the budget, some conversation around where we do what we do as well, from a zone perspective where it's relevant, a dive into the expenditure types, particularly direct costs and allocations, and a look at performance measures. And we'll do our best to answer the questions that you have today, but there might be some things that we need to take away. So just acknowledge that up front, but we'll certainly bring those back to you at the earliest opportunity, either through a meeting or through later correspondence. In general, I'll take the cover paper as read, because again, really the detail is in the attachment that's been provided with the meeting agenda today, which is from page 8 onwards. But Mr. Chair, I'll just pause for a sec if there's any questions from councillors before we get going. No, otherwise I'll start with a couple of directorate observations. So go to the next slide, please, Jess. So this just provides an overview of the activities that the Integrated Catchment Management Directorate undertakes. And as you can see, there is a range of activities and goers. And so what we've got there is the blue is the flood protection and control works goer, which includes flood protection, river management and land drainage. The green is the integrated catchment management goer, which is catchment planning and management, biosecurity and biodiversity. And then our emergency response and resilient development goer up the top there, which is the orange, and one of our smaller programs. And so all of our activities are very different. They're very different in terms of what we achieve. They're very different in how we fund it as well. And we look after a diverse teams across the region. We have multiple locations as a directorate, and you'll see that breakdown of staff numbers on page 11 of the document. But look, when you look across everything that we do, there is some commonality for us as a directorate. It's really important that we have a high level of capability and maturity in terms of what we do, how we govern our programs, and how we drive delivery. We approach our work at an integrated and regional scale, and that's certainly something that you've seen raised during the recent simplifying local government conversations, the need to really consider delivery of service at a catchment level and at a landscape scale. We have a resilient community, but we really need to move to thinking about adaptation because we know that there are increasing pressures in the community, whether it be from natural hazards or environmental issues or infrastructure challenges. And so we really need to move to having adaptation conversations with the community and think about the long term as well. Partnership led, when you look across all of our activities, we can't be successful without our partners, both in terms of working for common objectives and also shared funding opportunities. Science, evidence and intel. So we do a lot of work, not only within the directorate, but also with other parts of council to inform how we prioritise our work program, because there's always lots to do, but there is a need to prioritise our resource and where we put in our most effort. And the last thing is around strategic investment, and that really reflects the fact that the work that we do isn't just for here and now. It is about achieving strategic goals. It's about having much more sustainable infrastructure into the future. It's about making sustained improvements to our environment and maintaining programs that control things like pests in our region. So again, it's very much about not taking a 1 year view or even a 3 year view, but very much a long-term view in terms of the work that we undertake. There are also some common challenges that we have across the directorate, and those are noted in your report. I won't go through those, but again, we'll have a chance to dive into each of those once we go through our different activities. One thing I did want to highlight is the complexity of funding. And if you go to the next slide, please, Jess. This is just one example. It's probably our more complex area. This is our funding matrix that we use from Project Watershed for the Lower Waikato area, and that covers the Waikato zone. And so across down the side is the different activities that we undertake, from infrastructure through to catchment and river work, and across the top are the different contributors to the funding. And so, as you can see there, quite often we talk about targeted ratepayers versus general ratepayers, but you can see particularly in the Waikato region, there are many different levels that we have to consider as well. And that also means that the funding that we collect is for a very particular purpose as well, and a very specific outcome. So that's my brief directorate picture. So that's provided from page 8 of your directorate, of your agenda. I'll pause there if there's any directorate-wide questions before I go into and get into the infrastructure space. Okay, so if I go to page 13 of your agenda, and next slide, please. Right, go through another one. Infrastructure. So look, I'll provide an overview here. We are still going through a recruitment process for our manager infrastructure, so I'll step in for this one. So it's in page 13 of your agenda, and this covers the flood protection and land drainage activities. And I'm joined by Ruben and Brendan. So Brendan looks after our Waikato scheme. He's our scheme manager, and Ruben looks after our land drainage schemes. Just looking online, I'm not sure if we've got Thomas online. So Thomas is our new Hauraki Coromandel scheme manager. Yes, he is there. And so he's online for the Hauraki team. So I'll start with flood protection and why we do what we do. And I've taken this diagram from our regional asset management plan. And the intent here is just really to provide you with a picture of what really drives the work that we undertake. As you can see, it starts from the top with our national legislation, works through our own strategic direction as a council, through our long-term plan, and ultimately into a couple of key strategies, one of them being our infrastructure strategy. And that is something that is a review is underway at the moment as part of the long-term plan. And then that buries down into our planning that we undertake, and the regional asset management plan is another one where it has a huge amount of detail in terms of what we deliver, levels of service that we agree to, and the work that we undertake. We go to the next slide, please. So this is provided to give you an overview of the work that we undertake. If I start from the left of the slide, you can see that the income for the flood protection space is split between targeted rates and property rates being the general rate. And as I said earlier, when I showed you the example from Project Watershed, the targeted rate area does differ across our schemes. So for our Lower Waikato zone, for example, we have that Project Watershed approach. For the Hauraki Plains, we have different funding policies in place, which draw funding from different parts of the community. In terms of where we spend our money, so that's, and again, I'll refer to, just bear with me for a second. So this is on page 14 of your agenda. This shows the zone breakdown of our expenditure with regard to flood protection. And as you can see there, a majority of our funding is targeted on the large schemes. So Lower Waikato being the large darker blue colour there, and then Waihao and Piako being the other colours on the other side, the lighter blues. There is some smaller expenditure that occurs in other zones such as Coromandel and Lake Taupo and Waipa, and those are picked up just in the bottom there. So in terms of the direct costs, and so again, this is going to the right of the slide, you can see that a majority of our funding that we receive for direct costs goes through contracted services. And if you go to page 15 of your agenda, you'll see that there's a number of tasks that are noted there that are undertaken through contracted services. And to give you an example of the depth of support that we need. We are going through a as required review of our contracts at the moment, and across flood protection. In fact, a number of our activities, not just flood protection, it does involve about 150 odd contractors, and so we are very dependent on a range of services that have a range of geographic spreads as well, both within peacetime, so maintaining our schemes, but also during responses as well, where we need contractors to be on site to understand our work and to be available at short notice. If I move to the bottom of the slide there, which talks about our allocated costs or overheads. Sorry.
Can I just quick clarification, please, for me, for contracted services, are they only directly contracted to the regional council, or are they contractors performing work on properties? You know, do you distinguish?
So these are contracted services. They have a contract with the regional council, but it is to do work on our schemes, which is out on private properties. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. It just sounds like a mixture, basically.
And look, I know with our allocated costs, there's quite an interest from the committee around our allocated costs because it does comprise quite a significant proportion of our budgets. And so if you look on page 16 of your agenda, that gives you an overview of the allocated costs. And so if we look at our, I guess, traditional overheads, that's management costs, which makes up about 40% of our what are considered allocated costs. But there are a number of other significant areas that contribute to the size of those allocations. As you can see, there's RCS special projects allocation, and the explanation behind that is provided on page 16 as well, and that covers areas such as the asset management, which is where we maintain our asset management information, and we undertake condition inspections and manage our schemes as a whole, and then allocate that out to our schemes based on the valuation of those assets.
Yeah, thank you, and through you, Chair. Greg, just you're quoting low number pages, and the agenda I've got in front of me, ICM doesn't start till page 71, and I see others all trying to flick through and follow which pages you're on. So yeah, I'm getting nods from across the chamber. So
yes, so am I. So obviously we haven't all been shared the same.
Yeah, well, it's just a bit frustrating that some of us are working from page 71 onwards for ICM, for the ICM for this workshop, and then you're on page 1 to now you're on to page 13 or 14. So
yeah,
I'm just not sure why we've got a difference.
So the agenda I'm looking at is I'm on page 16 at the moment, which has our allocated costs.
That's good for you,
So
but I started page 71.
Yeah. I'm not.
Do you want me to add 16 on to 71?
Yeah, I'm not too sure what's happened there. Sorry.
I'll try 87, See what happens.
How widespread is that issue, councillors?
Oh, sorry, it's around the wrong way.
April, which is
Yeah.
in line with the
That's the one I printed.
8th of April. Same page.
Yeah.
Yeah, except I've got that same one as you, but I'm on page 19, not page 16 when it comes to the breakdown.
Did you print an extra page, Ben?
No.
So hold up page 17. What do you got? What picture have you got of page 17, Ben?
Page
Around
19, I've
Oh,
got
19.
Same as that.
chart breakdown of allocated cost types for flood protection activities.
81 to 84.
Oh, my circles start on page 90. Okay, we'll try and work through it, but
And my
yeah,
apologies for
just
that. Yeah, I'm not
if
too
you
sure what happened there.
potentially outline what the diagrams are, then we can
Yeah.
potentially find it. Thank you.
Sorry, Ben.
You failed it for me.
Okay, so what I'm looking at is page 16, and it's that diagram on the bottom, the blue bottom diagram, which is our allocated costs.
So I can make corrections.
Is everyone on that page?
Well done. You can.
I think it's page 83 on the attachment,
On the what, sorry?
on the attachment.
Okay, so as you can see, so our management costs include the normal costs that I guess follow our labour for this particular activity, but there is quite a significant proportion of other costs that come and are considered allocated costs. As I said, there's the RCS special projects allocation, and that's described further on in the report, just in point 24 there. There's also a flood general allocation, and so that's particularly for Lower Waikato zone. The uniqueness with the Lower Waikato zone is that that is divided up into different compartments, but there is some work that we do in that zone that does effectively span multiple compartments, and that's where that time goes to. And you can see interest on debt and loans is also captured there as a not insignificant part of our allocated costs for that particular activity. So further on in the report, so I'm not looking at page 17 now. Obviously, operational work is one thing that we do, but we also undertake quite a significant capital program in the flood protection space. And you can see on page 17, sorry, I'm not sure. 84. That there is a breakdown that is also focusing on our major schemes. That's where a majority of our work goes. One thing I would highlight though is that there is work coming up in other schemes. For example, Taupo, we're doing some work at the moment to assess the performance of that infrastructure and to look at capital work that might be required. Just lastly, just to acknowledge that, like many of our activities in ICM, we benefit from third-party funding, which helps to improve the affordability of the work that we undertake. And on page 18 of the agenda is a summary of our Kānoa funding, which we've recently received. One thing I would point out with that is that we are looking towards a much more sustainable pipeline of funding, as opposed to going from tranche to tranche, have a much more sustained commitment from the government to support not only capital, but also operation and maintenance.
Ben, you got a question?
Oh, sorry.
Lastly, our performance measures are summarised there for your information. And look, they relate to the achievement of our work program, the asset performance, event recovery, where there's recovery plans in place. And there's also a new measure which looks at taking a much wider look at the region and the risks that we have. So looking really beyond our current schemes. Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to stop there for the protection and take a question.
No.
So, Greg, can you just confirm so that everyone's on the same page that the Kānoa funding contribution actually goes into the pool and it doesn't actually get applied specifically to that project?
Correct.
If that's the project that justifies the
Business
funding,
case.
but then it goes into the pool and therefore the overall borrowings that we have are not as high as we have planned.
Correct.
And therefore, well, our loan funding is lower.
Yeah, it's a zone-wide benefit that's provided. You're right. So the zone, in terms of management of our debt, that is undertaken at a zone level as opposed to a compartment level. And so yes, that's where the benefit.
And so therefore, if say for example, Island Block is 5.7 million, the funders of that loan would be paying off the 5.7 million, or would they be paying off what? Just I want to get a true understanding, because it's the loan, we're paying off the pool of loans as opposed to the 5.7 million there. Is that right?
Correct. Effectively, the zone has a reserve, a capital reserve. And so our capital program draws from that reserve. And so it currently has a deficit balance, incurs interest, and it has a payback regime, and that's what the zone pays for.
Yeah.
So for Island Block, that is an overall project of 5.7 million, but we've received 1.7 million from the government to reduce the combination of depreciation and loan funding that we need to contribute to that.
So when you get down to it, how much would that reduce that project by? It's not going to reduce it by 1.6 million, is it? It's a proportion of that.
So it will reduce the amount of loan funding by that amount. So our capital program is funded through a combination of the depreciation we collect and also loan funding to make up the difference. And it's the funding from Kānau that reduces the loan funding that's necessary.
To the pool,
So the
to
pool of people,
not to the project.
the pool of people across the whole reserve pay the reserve. And so the overall debt's lower by that funding. But yeah, this is where apples with apples don't make sense.
No, that's right. Again,
Right, some questions. So, so this makes it easier for people at the very beginning of the document, page 1, 2, and 3, item number 14. Total operating expenditure is going from $64 million this year to $74 million next year, or no, last year to this year, 15% growth. What's the rationale behind that, and will that occur year after year, given that the explanation is climate change, inflation, overseas events like fuel? Those aren't going away. So are we going to see a 15% growth year on year in the next coming years?
So we're considering our budgets at the moment. And so we do have obviously growth in staff costs, and that'll be coming through. That's not 15% though.
So just on that,
we have had some
why growth in
increases.
staff costs, given that we've had a restructure and that we haven't got any more new staff?
Yeah, just simply growth in salaries. And so this is a matter
Of
that
10 million.
no, it's not that entire amount. So we also have growth in some of our fixed charges. Things like power have gone up over time. There's rates we know that have gone up. So if you look at from flood protection point of view, the different direct costs that we have. So where are we? You have a look on page 15 of the agenda. That gives a breakdown of the different direct costs that we incur through the activity. And that incurs a number of fixed charges that we need to accommodate within our budgets.
Yeah, so can you explain, because it's difficult to follow in this agenda, rather than referring to my agenda, $10 million is a lot of increase. That's 4 or 5% rate increase. You know, that's a lot of money added in.
So what page are you on, sorry, Councillor?
I'm on item number 14 of the first 3 pages of the document, summary, executive summary.
Yeah, so what I'll have to, I can go and get some further detail on that growth. I'll note that was a couple of years ago. So that provides growth between 23-24 and 24-25. And so that's at least a year ago. So I can get some further information on that for you.
Well, that was the 15% growth, and yet in the current 25-26 year, we're actually dropping back. So we're not increasing at all.
It's budgeted.
Yeah, true. Not the actual. Yeah. So.
Yeah, and look, I mean, one thing I would note is in 24-25 there may have been some event costs come through possibly, but I'd rather find that further information for you.
Okay, well, I note that further on in the document we currently have 173.5 staff, and those are the actual staff or the contracted staff?
Actual staff.
And that hasn't changed since the restructure?
No.
Okay.
No, the restructure was both budget and staff neutral.
Yes.
Headcount neutral.
Yes. Or just while we're talking about that, have you managed to fill the manager role and the chief engineer role yet?
So manager role, no, and that's why I'm leading this particular part of the presentation. Chief engineer, yes. We've appointed that role probably a couple of months ago.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so what we had there is a significant 15% increase in the previous 23 to 24, 25 year. The question is about whether that's going to continue and given the pressures. And then secondly is 14C, program costs make up approximately 60% of ICM's total expenditure, $44 million. Internal charges and overheads represent 40%. Now, I thought that was one of the things that was much concerning councillors from the area at the time, that the internal costs were very high at 40%. Can you comment on what those internal costs are?
Yeah, absolutely. So we go to page 16 on my agenda, which gives a breakdown of the allocated costs for the activity. That shows the range of areas that contribute to that figure. So as you can see there, about 40% of that figure is around our management costs, which is the cost that.
So rather than telling me the page number, which is not working for me, can you give me the actual number of the item?
So
23. So that's direct cost expenditure types for the flood protection activity.
If you go down to the next chart.
Breakdown of allocated costs for flood protection activity.
Correct.
That's flood protection.
Yes.
I'm talking about the overall. This is your overall summary says 40% of the costs, 29 million, is internal charges and overheads.
And so I don't think I'll provide the overall summary because it does vary quite significantly between activities. So what I can do is get you that overall figure. But if you go through activity by activity,
Okay, well, so let's just
allocation costs do differ quite significantly. And so let's go
to the one you were talking about. That's 2022, 24, is it? Breakdown of allocated costs for flood protection activity. '23. So breakdown of costs for flood protection activity, the management costs of 4.8 million.
Yes.
Which represents 42% of the cost. But that's what I'm asking.
We've had our go. It's, this is what I need to understand.
Well, I mean, management costs seem quite high compared to the other costs.
Through Robbie, Greg, can you explain what the management cost represents? Is that just your internal management costs? Is that the internal cost plus the?
Sorry, just on that, Chris, it does say management costs cover normal organisational overheads, including organisational direct management time, leave, training, and WRC initiatives. Yep. So it's defined.
So it's part
That's
of
normal.
It's
staffing.
part of the organisation costs, but that's only part of it because part of it is the internal cost to ICM, and that's what Greg, you should comment on.
Yeah, and so if you look at that chart, there's RCS special projects allocations, and so that covers a number of services that we use for our flood protection activities, such as asset management. And there is quite a chunk there, which is flood general allocation. As I said, that's a cost centre that's specific to the Lower Waikato zone.
Sorry, I'll pass back to
It's it's ICM in the old days. RCS used to be called River and Catchment Services.
I think fundamentally what the landowners struggle to understand is management costs, and it's all lumped under management costs, and you get the breakdown. One of the complicating issues is for every project, everything, because of the different inputs, the different staff involved, there's no one formula that equally says this is what it is. And that's something that Robbie and I, and so I'll speak for myself, that I had difficulty coming to terms with. It's not simple. I still don't accept it, but I think I understand it, and that there's a difference. Somebody has to pay to run the business. But when you look at and this is, I think, Chris does as well, says we've had problems understanding that the management costs to get the work done costs as much as 100% of the actual work. So you get a quote, it's $5 million, but the project costs 10 million. It's that added cost that we want to dig down to and see, is there any way that we can trim out some of that cost Because there's nothing else. If a contract comes in at 5 million, that's what the contractor wants. And unless we screw the contractor, that's what it costs. It's how, what those added value, how do we attack that and try and remove any fat that we can? That's simple. Would that be fair, Robbie? You and I, it's that management cost that we're trying hard to understand and get reduced. Yeah, but you can't actually run the business so lean that it can't do the business.
Yeah, we've been trying to work towards not affecting the capability of the business, but actually delivering it in a cheaper and easier way. And as we found out, the way we operate and manage renewals, when it takes up to 5 years for that to take place, there's a lot of hidden costs in the background of what it takes to go through those gates or stages, what we call them now. And that adds a lot of cost. And it actually adds it doesn't just add cost, it actually adds risk, because time is risk. And it projects, if they're taking longer to get done, there's actually becomes more roadblocks to actually making them that it gets to the end and goes, now it's got too dear and got too expensive. So I know council looks at it as we do this to cover that there isn't a risk, but that risk management actually causes a greater risk at the end, that you're getting to the end and going, shit, a project that should have cost 7 million is now at 10.
And therefore, one of the questions that we have is our risk profile. Are we prepared to take a greater risk profile, or do we want to be absolutely 100% clear that there's nothing going to trip us up? And somewhere in the middle is the sweet spot. But, you know, we can't do it on our own, and that's why this has come back to a committee to.
And I've got to add some more. So, as the management costs is the traditionally what you see as overheads, which follow labour. And so it's a mixture of both ICM and organisational costs. And the remainder is really the work that we do to, for example, have the right maturity in the asset management space to deliver the service. So it is a risk conversation. Obviously, council has chosen to have an asset management approach. It's required to do that. It's required to demonstrate that it has that right level of maturity in place and is making good decisions around its assets. So it's all of those support services that are there to support the activity. One thing I would say is that, say, for example, if we engage a contractor to undertake a job for $10,000, it does cost us $10,000. So you don't add a management cost on top of that. But where the additional cost does come is when staff labour is required to manage that contract, and that attracts overhead costs with it.
That's the difference between me as a farmer and Robbie as a farmer. We just employ the digger driver. He comes in, he does the job, he leaves, and his bill is $10,000, and you pay $10,000. You don't have. There's no one else managing. You absorb that. But in an organisation such as this, somebody's got to pay for the staff time and the lights and everything, as we've all learned. Probably have thrown it at Chris if I can, Chris. Where can we find the savings?
This is your opportunity to dig in and find it. Now, if management costs are your concern, you need to dig. You've got to ask the questions, and where you might not feel you've got enough visibility or whatever, that's what we'll need to bring you back. But there's several issues have been raised in here about what does it cost to do for a contractor? How long does a project take? This is more aimed at, or what are the costs of doing the business? This little bit, Greg, this is the management costs. You've indicated, you haven't indicated the split between the corporate and internal management costs, because I think what the councils are asking is, do we need all that level of management costs internally, or is there potential to reduce it within ICM?
Yeah, but it is. Are we going to get
that?
that? We're not going to get that information today, but we're going to get that in the financial report, aren't we? Is that where we're going to get that?
If you ask the question.
And so I do know that the Finance and Performance Committee has already received a paper on organisational overheads, and I think that it's in the order of 14%. I understand is the magic number. And then that is separate to the ICM related management costs.
So they're interested in the ICM ones.
No, that's not your turn.
I'm just trying, as I asked Chris to answer, the issue is that we've got to come back to the divide and conquer. We do it in finance and we do a specific thing.
Yeah.
We do it in ITM here today. We're not doing a joined up exercise. And that's where it feels like divide and conquer to me at times. And I know that's not the intention.
Can I clarify through,
Yeah.
Robert? So there is a workshop in early September, I think it is, where everything comes together. This was originally going to be this was an opportunity originally for each committee to dig down, ask the questions, whatever, then it's going to be brought back together.
And this is a joint ICMC and Finance and Performance initiative today.
Ian. To me again, okay. So one of the things I noticed is there's a heavy dependence on contractors. Although there's 173 staff and the 40% of management type costs, contracted services, and this is item number 12 on the, and after you've come past the attachment, it's attachment 1, item 12, direct cost types that fund all ICM activities. It's immediately under the diagram showing the director and staffing. Contractor services are 31.6 million, 76% of the expenditure. So you're heavily reliant upon contractors. So obviously you need to manage contractors. Anyone's looking, it's this one here, which is immediately after that page. You obviously need to manage them, but are the contractors overcharging or holding us to ransom on some things? Is this an area where we could be looking more tightly at?
So every contract that we have in place is put in place through our procurement policy that we have. And so depending on the size, each contract gets subject to a different level of scrutiny. And certainly for our larger ones, we go through open procurement process, open tendering, to make sure that we are getting good value for money and good performance on behalf of council. It is a very rigorous process that we go through. It's only really for our smaller amounts that we would look at, say, a 1 or 2 quote approach. But again, we go into the market knowing what services are, what the prices are like, so that we can demonstrate that we are getting good value for money for council. We have also recently tightened up our procurement even of smaller ad hoc works through a recent open tendering. Went through an as required panel process to actually make sure that we understand what the market is telling us, making sure that we're opening ourselves to the market as well, so we've got good competition, and that we can make good decisions in terms of getting that value for money for council.
What concerns me here is the 15% increase from 23 to 24 and the potential for that increase to carry on 10 million a year. It's a good report. You actually set out the details and you do highlight climate change is happening. The stock banks are stinking and declining. There's work that has to be done. There's more issues coming through. I mean, is it a reality that we are going to have to face increasing costs in ICM in the future?
For me, I guess how I've tried to describe in the report is that there are, if I lift up to a directorate level, there's a number of pressures that we do have in our work programs, and we just need to consider those pressures going forward in terms of the delivery. It is a decision for council where it wishes to invest more or do things differently, but these are all pressures that we would have to navigate one way or another.
And so just finally, because I'll let someone else have a chat, targeted rates are basically 75% of what funds this. So essentially farmers are paying for this work, landowners, but
Ratepayers,
but largely rural large landowners and targeted rates.
So one thing I would point out is that targeted rates is quite a broad definition. They are described differently throughout the attachment. And I think probably the infrastructure targeted rates are the ones that are referenced most, because those are the landowners that directly benefit from our infrastructure. As I showed earlier, there's also a zone-based approach, which is much wider and captures a lot wider range of ratepayers. There is a Waikato wide approach as well, as a resident in Hamilton, I pay a targeted rate to support Lower Waikato infrastructure. But looking beyond infrastructure as well, there's biosecurity targeted rates as well, which is a region-wide rate which is targeted at biosecurity. So there are differences. And when you look at, gosh, I've got a spreadsheet here that looks at all the different targeted rates. There's dozens of them which are targeted at particular activities that council does.
So just three things to finalise. So can you come back to us? The concern I have is 44 million is direct program, 29 million is internal allocations and overhead. So can you break the internal stuff down better? Secondly, as Noel said, that while we have this work, are we looking to reduce the level of service or push rates up, pay for it in future? No, but that's the question we've got. If climate and things are keep coming, do we put up the rates or do we accept a lower level of service? And then finally, are we getting 15% more value for 15% more expenditure?
The last question is a difficult one because we have maintained our level of service that we provide in this space fairly consistently. We have lifted rates. I know following the last long-term plan, we lifted in the biosecurity and biodiversity area. So that'll be part of that lift that you're seeing come through. And sorry, we're at infrastructure, but I'm taking a direct look now. And so that's what will be driving that increase. And so that has driven a high level of service. We know, for example, that the Natural Heritage Fund has lifted from, gosh, I think it was about $7 property up to 15. So that's gone through and that has provided more money for the community. So a high level of service. What were the other?
Oh, so the other point.
If I can help with
Yeah.
what the other points were. So any increases in the programs will come through the LTP process and they will be yours as councillors to make.
Yeah.
If, for instance, the contracted services is going to go up, it might be, for example, that the ICMC has chosen to expand the capital program or accelerate it, so more gets done, which of course there'll be more contracted services. But all of that would need to come through council process and get signed off by council.
These were just questions for he's coming back to that.
Yeah. Yep. But just an assurance that there, we normally put the bill inflation across it. That's all you should see from an inflationary perspective, which will include staff, predicted labour costs and whatever. Anything new would come through a business case, right?
Yeah, and so look, in terms of level of service and whether council chooses to change that level of service, that's all part of that process that we're running through right now. And I think it's early September, isn't it, Chris, for that initial workshop?
Thank you, Gary Raymer. Thank you, Chair. Look, I think it's an interesting discussion, and the way I've seen it and the way I've looked at it right from the start, essentially the only thing we can control around here is wages and salaries, because a lot of the other stuff is, it's the bricks and mortar, if you like. And so when I went through the paper, in the highlight, I won't read out all the pages, but the other side of the room has pretty well identified the areas, wages and management and contracts, everything else. And I went through and I identified that. So it's just a huge portion of that is wages. So what I'd like to add to the discussion around that is, isn't the bigger issue structure and what we get? And Noel touched on, whether we, services applied to services charged out, for what we do. So with what we're talking about with what we're doing around local government reform, aren't we better off if we wanted to take, if we're really serious about taking some of the overheads and costs out of ICM, is to actually give the responsibility back to the farmers and back down to that catchment boards where we started, or where the regional council started probably 30 or 40 years ago, just drainage boards, and then we remove all that overheads, Is the discussion a wider level, and should we go to that higher level to what it might look like under a unitary, because that'll remove a lot of that sort of stuff potentially from a unitary council and take it right down to catchment board level and thus remove the overheads. So it is about structure as much as anything else, and if we change the structure, we change the cost structure as well at the same time.
No, I think is someone going to answer that?
Yeah, I guess, so you're right, it is about level of service that this council provides, and that's exactly the consideration that this council will be running through during the development of this long-term plan. I can give an example. We haven't gotten to land drainage yet, but there is an example there where we adopt a self-administration operating model, which is basically where the local landowners take responsibility for the program delivery. It doesn't come for nothing. It does mean that instead of our staff doing the normal work that they would be doing in terms of work program planning and supervision, that responsibility falls to the landowners to undertake.
The self-administering model is good, where the landowners have got the desire and motivation to be involved. If they continue to get more self-administered areas, there's going to be a critical mass where it's too expensive with the overheads that are left in the organisation for the remaining administered areas to continue without self-administration. But therein lies the problem. There's a lot of young farmers who have not seen the floods of the 50s and the likes. And we're getting that in some of the areas where there's flood pumps. And why do we have to pay for flood pumps? Because they've never had a flood. In Manor Park out here, Eureka was a classic example. We're not going to pay, we're not paying. They had a flood. Oh, we need a pump. You know, it's not until you have the problem and you don't want to artificially create one to make sure that they support it. So it's a matter of actually the critical mass issue of once so many leave and self-administer. And I think the option we've got to be talking with farmers is the next step. It's the privatisation, where they take over. And the big issue with the landowners at the moment is they don't want to be responsible for the consent and gaining the consent because of the costs, whereas the organisation does it, spreads the costs out. So there's I don't want to go into too much more detail, but yeah, there's a tipping point in self-administered, but it's only for those who are willing. And you know, getting some of the farmers who don't see a problem because the systems in place actually prevent the problems for the reasons that they were put in there in the first place. I'm sorry, yeah, it's not easy.
Thank you. Well, Chris?
Thanks, Chair Robbie. Look, I'll try and keep this simple because I've been harping on about a particular case since I started here in council, and some of the new boys won't have heard me talk about it. And some of the other ones are going to have to put up with me repeating it again for I don't know how many times. One particular catchment has a drainage cleaner who's been doing the work for, I think, 50 years, 40 or 50 years anyway.
Yeah, Van, that's
They know the work, they know the job. Must be doing it properly, otherwise they wouldn't keep being rehired. Their bill to the regional council, or for that, to the catchment, is $30,000 for that work. It ends up on their rates bill at 62 to 65,000. Now, I've been trying to find out what the latest costs are, and everybody's gone to ground on it, and I can't get the information from anybody, unfortunately. So I can't update the information, which is now 4 years old. That explains this chart here. But what I want to see, please, Greg, is how that translates to that actual project. And you know the one I'm talking about, and it's $30,000 bill expends to 62 or 65 on the rates bill. It's that difference. Where does the detail constitute that difference between the 30 and the 60?
The allocation.
So is this in regard to Motor Karakia?
Motor Karakia drains.
Yep, so I do have a breakdown of the budget further on, and I can provide some further detail. I guess what you're looking at there is that, as I said, if we engage a contractor to do $30,000 worth of work, whether it's mechanical cleaning or spraying, then it costs council $30,000 and it costs ratepayer $30,000. But what comes with that overall program is the staff time and the allocated costs that are required to plan, supervise, and report on that program. And so that'll be the additional, why their rates bill is not $30,000, it's 60 something. But as I said, I've got some
I understand
details from
that.
Karakia.
Look, Greg, I understand all that. What I'm asking is, how can we justify that? Because these guys, the people that are doing the work, have done it for the last 40. They're not going to. They've got the same people. You obviously visit them and check their credentials if you have to. I don't know, but I just cannot understand
how you can take a project which costs X amount of dollars, the people know what they're doing, they've done it for so many years, why we need to have such a high level. And that's what I'm saying. Can we see rather than just a pie chart, can we actually see the breakdown of the costs? Where is it coming from? Is it health and safety? What is it that's actually inflating that $30,000 to $60,000? So that's my first question, all right? And then an answer to some of the other questions, like the one that Gary asked. That may well give us an insight into what costs are being allocated from this organisation to projects. And then we can sit down and say, is there a more efficient way of delivering that? How are we identifying, for example, the contractors who are doing the work? Now, I think it was our chief executive told me, during the post-COVID area, the prices from contractors escalated, 50, 60, 70%. They were not competitive compared with what you're used to paying. But I understand those costs have come back down again now. And Chris, you might want to correct me on that. And if that's the case, then is the tendering process working? Is there enough price tension in the market for the tender process to work efficiently, or do we need to look at a different model? I've had this discussion with the chief executive too. And my suggestion was that maybe we have selected contractors and we work an open book policy with them. So it's what is it costing them? Give them a fair margin for the work they're doing, so you actually control the costs that they're submitting. You're not going through a tender process. This is probably against local government New Zealand rules and regulations. But we have to think of a different model which is going to deliver the same level of service at a cheaper price. And this is just one thought that I had in terms of how we can do it. So I know I'm probably babbling on about things which you've already thought about, but we have to look at a different model if this system's going to endure. Otherwise, we're going to be rating the people off the properties. And I don't want to see that happen.
Can I go into that Motu Karakia thing? So I think what he's asking for is a total breakdown of all the expenses, what it costs to get from that 30,000 to the 60,000. And that is, if it's fish recovery, you have to be dead honest about this, because we need to understand how the business works. So if a portion of that is fish recovery or whatever it is, whatever the line items are that are charged for that to happen, we've got to understand that model. I think that's what you're getting down to, Chris. We want it line by line. So then we understand what you have to do to do what you need to do that project or that job. Because what we're saying is, if I'm a farmer, I go and get the digger in, I spend $5 on a phone call and I get a $30,000 job done. So my job actually only cost $30,000 and $5, not 60 grand. So we need to understand every single allocation or what it takes to get that done. So then we understand how every cost is allocated to do that. I don't know. That's what you're asking for, Chris?
Absolutely. Like we have to unpick what's happening. Right? Yeah. It's the only way we're going to understand.
And I think...
And then we can start to realistically challenge cost inputs to each of those projects, because, and I'm only suggesting we look at one. I don't want to go and, because what applies to one will apply to all the others as well. So
I think when we see that pool of management costs of 4.8 million, we need to unpick that a little bit better to understand that as well.
Yeah, but Robbie, look, that tells you the global picture.
Yeah.
I'm more interested in looking at the specific project. You look at one, they'll all replicate one another. Won't very much variation, and I might be wrong, but I'm assuming the one. Right. So that's.
Thank you.
That's what I'd like to see.
Keith, we need to get on with the questions because we're eating up our time pretty quick.
I think Brendan was going to offer some observation.
No. But I think these are all going to be seamlessly just jumping at the end. There you go.
Okay. Thanks, Robbie.
Just
so follow on for what Chris Hughes has been saying. I think that honesty needs to be there, because having been on the receiving end of this and watching that the contractors have to work by the code of the Waikato Regional Council. And so a lot of contractors normally, if we're talking about diggers, will start at daylight and knock over when it's dark. And
with Waikato Regional Council, some of the processes, and I don't think they've changed. There must be a Waikato Regional Council person on site, and they turn up at 9 o'clock in the morning or 10:30 and leave at 3. So that means they've got a short working day. So that honestly needs to be there. But I think I go back to what Chris Hughes, Chris McClay was talking about is the process. And the process of the management is something that we need to unravel, unpick it, and be honest about it. See why it's taking so long to get things off the ground. This decision-making process, the whole mechanisms, and for those of us that come from the outside into here, it's unbelievably stodgy to get things done, and so we need to unravel that if we're going to cut the costs out. The other thing I'd just like to put on there, I struggle to make sense of all this because there's no indices, and so to give you an example of, there is a couple there. There's the RAT index and the FOSSUM index, and they are achievable. But if we used to have this in the old long time ago, a cost per metre of drainage, and that would be broken down into actual work done and overheads. And in that, and Noel will probably remember these days, some drainage districts were working with about a 70% actual digger in the ground type or spray in the ground type operations, and some were working with about 15%. And having those figures gives us the ability to say, okay, well, why is this happening? Where's the differences happening? And make those comparisons. So I would plead with you to get some indices so that we can make comparisons and even compare with the Bay of Plenty and those sort of things so that we can see where the issues are and the challenges. And I don't think we should be frightened about it. It's all about trying to reduce the cost. And getting back to Noel's point about, do you lower the service? We don't have, put it this way. As somebody that has been passionate and been involved in drainage and flood protection, I don't have a feeling of where we sit in terms of our integrity of our systems, whether it's been going backwards or going forwards at all. And I think those indices need to be there. Are the stop banks at 82% or 95%? Let's track them so that we've got a comfort that we're actually getting value for money. And if we need more and we don't get Kanoa funding, what are we got to do?
So if I might respond just to that latter comment, we do track our performance and condition of our assets. ICMC will be receiving an annual condition report at its meeting coming up in September. And also I'll just note one of the performance measures that we do have for flood protection talks about the performance of our stop banks for urban and rural settings, and that targets, I think it's 93, 95%. And we do regularly track to that to make sure that, as you say, we are keeping on top of the programs and providing what's expected from the community. Yeah, but noted your other points. Thank you.
Could I just add to that comment? So the condition of assets in New Zealand is a major problem. Look at the roads which have been rebuilt because which is pretty new. The regional sector does do benchmarking of maturity, or well, councils assess their assets and are able to prioritise what needs to be done. This council actually rates really highly, Greg. And I don't know if that gets reported through ICMC, but I just want to give you some assurance that is done. It is benchmarking. I'm not talking about the benchmarking of comparing a cost per metre across different councils, but in terms of infrastructure quality, which most of this conversation is all about, we do a good job relatively to other councils. There's always room to improve, but those margins of improvement get harder and they tend to be a bit more costly, which is where the risk appetite comes into it.
Gary, please. Sorry, no. Gary.
My concern that comes continually to me is that from the farmers in these drainage districts, I totally agree with what Gary Rame is saying about putting the running power back into the hands of those farmers again. is we can take a couple of examples. One's been well and truly spoken here, and it's one of the smallest ones, and that's the 30K to 65K for the drain cleaning in the Motor Karakia. That job's been done for years by Theo Van Lieshout, now Tony Van Lieshout, and they could not understand how their quote, 30 grand that's been there for years, all of a sudden jumps to 65. So that absolutely screams that there is an over regulation in the from the council here in administration. Big one, or one of the big ones is the work that was quoted for the bearing replacement in the Manga Tāwhiri 3, where the bearing replacement, a proposal was put forward by the engineers, local engineers up there, $200,000 or $250,000, inflated to $700,000, inflated to $1.8 million for a job that the local farmers there had work done by local engineers. So those farmers then approached the council in the last triennium. Pam Story finally went up at election time and had a meeting with the farmers and said, okay, we've already embarked on this here without talking with you. It's gone too far. You're committed to $1.8 million, which those farmers banged the table and said, we will not pay it. We cannot afford to pay it. You will bankrupt us. So this is the sort of thing that we have to get under control. We have to stop this nonsense of, okay, if it's put in by the council and it's put in on the reason of health and safety or whatever, inflating something from 200 grand to $1.8 million is totally unacceptable. And that is exactly what our farmers have been trying to get through to this council now for some time. So please prove me wrong if you can, but how can you justify jumping a bill from 200 grand to 1.8 million?
Gary, I 100% support what you're trying to say, but I think you're getting confused because that is asset renewals as well as recapitalisation of an asset. It wasn't just a bearing.
That may be.
It wasn't just a bearing, but I'll let Greg carry have his look on it. But
what the point is,
I understand your point, but you're getting that you've got. It wasn't just a bearing replacement. There was a recap. They had to renew the asset. They put in sluice gates. There was a whole lot of other things involved in that project. It wasn't just a bottom bearing.
the question from the farmers was that necessary to go to that extreme? Though?
Mr. Chairman, can we come back to the point of what we're here today for, and that is to actually drill down and look at just how we do that. We understand and we've heard about that, and we've got other examples, but what are we doing about drilling down to look at the cost? If we can't peel the costs out when we're given this opportunity and we've got a separate workshop, then I think we need to look at in the long-term plan, going out to our landowners and consulting with them. This is what we've done. We've tried to peel it back. That's the cost structure. The opportunities are self-administering, privatisation. Do you wish to, us to continue, or, we go down that way to shove it off to another cheaper organisation? But, this is, we're drilling down. We're not looking at we know the reasons why we were doing this.
Yeah.
Let's focus on peeling it, stripping it out now. Sorry, Gary, we're wasting time and not getting to where we need to go. Yeah. Okay. Sorry.
All I was doing was highlighting.
We all know those highlights and the very embarrassing highlights that this council was made aware of 2 years ago, Gary. So we all know that, and there's a lot of pain behind those numbers. I can tell you that as a councillor of the previous council. Have you got anything to add to that one?
I could probably speak about that project for quite a while, but I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Yeah. Where are we moving to now? Oh, Breen.
I just wanted to summarise where we got to so far. So basically, the 14C, 40% of our costs are coming from internal charges and overheads. Now, we were told in the last triennium, you can't look at this because we're busy doing a structural review of ICM. That's now through. So now's the time to actually focus in and break it down on those costs. So you'll come back to us with more information on that. Second point is the 15% growth in costs from 64 million to 74 million in the last previous year. That seems to be 76% of our expenditure going to contractors. So we need to look at what the contractors are. And I think the crucial paper is the one coming to Chris Hughes through Finance and Services, where you're starting to look. And I hope that that's broken down to ICM contractors as well, separately from contractors in general, so that we can begin to look at those figures. Because I think the most crucial document coming forward is possibly that contractors' financial stuff coming through you, Chris. And just thirdly, the question that Warren raised is the 15% increase from 64 to 74 million, 23 to 24, 25 is budgeted to be static almost at 73.7 million in 25, 26. Are we on track for that budget, or are we anticipating a significant increase in what was budgeted?
So in terms of end of year performance, I think that report is coming to Finance and Performance next week.
Oh, but you must know what the answer is.
Yep.
Is it?
Yes, we're generally on track. I think we did have some carryovers in a couple of contracts. Certainly in the flood protection space, we're on track.
So basically what you're saying
in more detail, but yes, we
what
are.
You're saying is the 15% increase isn't continuing.
No, so for this financial year, you've got the information in front of you. And as we said earlier,
budgeted figure, not the actual.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So it's not like this exponential curve, because that's $100 million over 4 or 5 years. It's like, yeah. But at the same time, acknowledging that you have made a case for we need to spend more money in this area if we're to keep the level of services up. And my concern there is what's happening if Kanoa stops paying us. Or are we caught in a position a bit like Peacocks, where because the government gives you money, you spend money because there's government money available, you've got to match it, and you end up blowing out your costs overall. So that was.
Yeah, look, as far as the Kanoa commitment, I mean, as I said, there's a longer term conversation to be had. If they weren't providing us the money to do this work, then we would be borrowing more as a council to get this work undertaken. We're well within our debt ceiling in terms of what we can borrow. But obviously it does have an impact on our ratepayers, which we're trying to manage through this funding from the government.
No, just a quick question. So the Kanoa money, is that what Ben's talking about? Or is that other money? Because
Kanoa is government money.
Yeah, but that's in our expenditure and our income, isn't it? So that to me represents the 15%.
Just to clarify that whenever Kanoa gives us money, it doesn't give us the whole amount. So we have to stump up with extra, which actually advances our projects faster, but may mean we're spending money when we wouldn't necessarily have done it.
Yeah.
Just to clarify, so the Kanoa work program is work that we do have already identified. The benefit from Kanoa is how it's funded and the affordability. It can provide some encouragement to get projects done quicker, but generally it's work that we already have programmed.
You had a projected sheet of about 30 years, our debt levels, and essentially we're 30, 40 million. And then within, by the time we get to halfway, it's accelerated. And we're up to 300 odd million at the end of 30 years. So I just wonder whether you could drag that out and just tell us how we are matching that, because as we always said at the time, if we got to 300 million in 30 years, no one in the land could afford it. So I would really like to know whether that's still appropriate, ground truth it and put it in front of us, because I think that would be very helpful to the landowners.
And that's the joy of inflation, and that will be coming through in the infrastructure strategy conversation. I've seen a draft of that same chart, which is being updated at the moment. Yes, you will.
Thank you, Warren.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie. Greg, I think a couple of things that would be helpful would be, one, to actually see the impact on what the weather events have had you know, on our budgets and that sort of thing, and that work and resilience. We obviously had that report last week, which gave us a lot of insight on into that resilience space. But I think that is a critical key to some of this and where that spend's going compared to what would be normal BAU. The other thing I'd be interested in too is just a piece for the ICM Directorate on not contractors but consultants. And my view of consultants, and I know that contractors consultants line gets blurred a little bit, but to me, for this example, a contractor is the man with the digger, or he's out on site doing that sort of thing, compared to a consultant that's giving advice, and where there are any potential gaps in our staffing for that consultant need that we need to bring in external consultants. So just a little bit around that would be helpful too, because it has been an issue for this council in the previous triennium. Just getting our heads around that. You know, I can understand the work being done on site, but it's that consultant piece that you know, do we have gaps in capability within the organisation, and this is why. So
and look, the short answer is yes, that we do have contracted or consultancy services that are both physical works and professional services. They do cover a range of areas, and that's really down to what we can undertake, both in terms of capacity and capability within council versus what we need to bring in. In terms of the cost of the recent events, so that information will be coming to you, to the ICMC, with a summary of that, and there'll be a further paper around use of our disaster recovery reserves, and with regard to the resilience program. We're jumping a little bit around activity.
Yeah, I realise that.
In terms of activity, and so that's a conversation that I'll be bringing to your workshop in September about how council wishes to move forward.
Thank you.
So I'll jump in for some of mine. When you AI that paper, the first thing it says is procurement, that you need to rationalise it and actually get in using a system that's not tendering and actually driving it to a pipe of projects and pipelines that you can rely on one or two contractors to do a delivery of work, that they're specialised in that work and not someone setting themselves up for stages of work. It says that straight away as soon as you AI it. That the way we can deliver this is cheap, can be a lot cheaper if we use a system that identifies a group of organisations and then we just deliver the assets. Not going out for tender, your AI, that's what it says straight away. So I think that's something you guys should go away. I'm a councillor, I AI'd it and it just said that straight away. Pipeline of work, yet it can be done easier and more efficiently in another way. The other, I think we need a breakdown of those management costs, like Chris has said, and we need to find some efficient. Well, I don't know the efficiencies we need to find, because in the end, as I said before, that if I'm a farmer and I'm operating my own business. And this has been hard for me for the last 4 years. I've really struggled with it. That I go and clean a drain, it costs me $100. If you're talking the way that this organisation runs, that costs me $200. And no matter what, that becomes unaffordable just because of this, of how in the framework that you operate in. And I'm not saying it's wrong. But for us, we need to actually understand that detail so then we can feel comfortable or what needs to change in that space. But anyway, Warren, you've got a question?
I was just going to say, we need to keep in mind that what this organisation is, the constraints that we have working under the Local Government Act and that sort of thing, the fact that we're not a farmer with 10 staff, but we're an organisation with 175 in ICM.
Yep.
And those constraints. And I think a lot of the information clearly shows that we're obviously got some test cases that Greg's going to come back to us with that level of, let's call it burden, because it's the term we also need to know. But it's just we need to remember we're working with public money and that sort of thing. Yeah. So as long as councillors get clarity around the extra constraints and costs that puts on us, then you can have a little bit of comfort in where you get to.
100%.
So as long as we've got that clarity.
100% support what you're saying there, Warren. Like, I've had private conversations with organisations that do work with us. And one thing they bring up is said, why do you have 20 different engineers designing stuff all the time? Why don't you just have one engineer design it that we know who we're dealing with, we know the program and the pipeline of work, and we're not dealing with 10 different blooming floodgate designs or pump station designs. We're just dealing with one, like the low Waikato, no matter what the size of the drainage network is, we have a specific design and we work to it. All the floodgates here can be a similar size. The maintenance in the future, because it actually says that in AI, is rationalising your assets to make it cheaper for maintenance. It also says, if you're flicking through it, it says more cameras and data systems to rely on assets so staff don't have to be there all the time. That's some of the first stuff it says to pop up to running these assets cheaper. Is actually more data collections and all sorts of stuff. So that's all the things we've got to look into. It's not, sorry, Juan, I most probably went a bit far down the rabbit hole when I was explaining myself before. But if you just flick on AI, it just comes up with this whole spreadsheet of stuff that you guys should be doing your job better in. And I'm not saying it's all right, but it's something you should look into. And I know you've been looking into it the other day, Brendan, when we had a good conversation on the phone, and you said, hey, Robbie, I'm going to the field days and look at using drones for spraying drains. And that's the sort of stuff we need to really get into, that we can do these jobs far more efficiently and cheaper and quicker.
Business case.
But I think, Warren, you hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
But just going back to what I said earlier, if we come up and we can't get the cost down, we have to go this time round to our community for the restructure and all that to ask them what they want us to do. Do we carry on charging them double what they would expect, or do we work towards moving it out? Yeah, we'll come to that crossroads, I think.
And can I just throw in there that if we believe a unitary council is going to save costs, it's not.
No, 100%. No, it's not. Yeah. Chris.
Yeah, look, my comments are pretty similar to what Ed Niall will be saying, and it relates back to what I was saying before. We need to relook at how the business is. Simple as that. You can't just take something up and somewhere else and expect a different outcome. It won't happen. You've got to start to pull it apart, peel it off, rebuild. Don't do that, you're going to get the same outcomes.
I was just going to say, I'm relying upon Chris Hughes's team to actually give us the info on this sort of stuff. But I just also wanted to point out, you're having a hard time here, Greg, but there is a strong use of technology. You've done your remote monitoring of pump stations, drone inspections, satellite imagery, AI assistant, landslide assessment. You're doing a lot of the innovative things. So there's real positives here as well.
Yeah, and look, if I could note that with this particular activity that we're focusing on at the moment, budgets have been pretty flat, actually, for this particular activity. And so that has driven innovation, that has driven a different way of thinking about things. And it's driven everything that's noted, but also it is driving more thinking that needs to happen. We know that there are smarter ways to deliver the service. We know that the cost of delivering that smarts is also coming down as well, so it's much more accessible to council to be able to see those improvements.
Just for an example, like Greg was talking when we met Robbie and I the other day, we've been trying to get pumps made locally that instead of importing them from overseas. I don't know whether this is commercially sensitive, is it? I don't want to say anything that I shouldn't. The cost for New Zealand is indicative 30, 40, 50% more than what we can import them from the Netherlands. So, it's what we'd like to happen here. It's just not practical at the moment. We're going to be importing pumps for quite some time until New Zealand can actually match the. So it's not an easy fix.
Yeah. All right. Look, so I'm very conscious that I know there was a lot of interest in the infrastructure activity, and I do want to get on to the other parts of the business. If I go through another slide, please. I would just note that land drainage is there as well. And look, just noting the request for a much deeper dive into, in particular the Motor Karakia Catchment, just to show you exactly what's sitting there. One thing I would highlight with land drainage is it is a bit of a different approach in terms of flood protection. It is work that is 100% funded through the direct beneficiaries on the ground, but it's incredibly complex as well. It's a relatively small budget, but divided between 92 different subdivisions, each with its own reserve, each with its own work program. In terms of when we speak to things like work program efficiency, this isn't a great example because of the amount of administrative effort it needs from council to run this program. The overheads are a little bit different from flood protection, and that you can see that about half is the management costs, which we'll give you a detailed breakdown on. But the other half represents the fact that there's a lot of work that Ruben and his team does that straddles all the subdivisions in terms of work program planning, supervising and reporting. And so that's where the other half of that overhead contribution comes from. Next slide, please. And this is just it is a breakdown of Motor Karakia, but I suspect this doesn't go deep enough. And what this is showing is in terms of the overall costs, allocations versus direct costs. You can see that there's the majority of the work is done through contracted services, but then with a breakdown of those allocations and direct costs. But look, I don't know if there's much point going into that in any great detail. You've sought some more detailed information, which I'll bring back to you in due course. But I'll pause here to see if there's any other questions around the land drainage program.
Highlighted the fact I asked you yesterday for that extra detail. You didn't get the opportunity to do it before this morning. So, yeah, I think we want to actually see that real example of Motor Karakia line by line.
Noel, can you just explain what you asked? Because I think that was relevant.
Through the paperwork, page 25, example of Motor Karakia, example list direct costs, allocated costs. Can you provide the detail at the meeting under those two cost centres, as I think it would be immensely helpful to further refine the council's understanding of the costs. Thanks. And I'll leave it. And Greg obviously hasn't had the opportunity to bring that forward this morning. So I think you tried to get another slide or two. But
well, this is the additional information that I have managed to bring together. But I think you're looking for another level of detail, which is fine. Hear that. I guess one thing I'll pick up here is you can see the large proportion of allocated costs to Motor Karakia. But then if you look at the nature of those allocated costs, much of them go towards the general subdivision area, which is the general work that's done right across the land drainage program to support those 92 subdivisions. And that type of work is noted in your paper. I think, is there another slide after this? That's it. Oh, and this is just an indication of general subdivision in terms of, again, the type of work that supports, and it's primarily labour from Ruben and his team.
There's a lot of things that happen with the land drainage that aren't specific to a particular reserve. So we've got quite a bit of our costs that get spread across everything. Yet not everyone actually benefits from that particular work. It's just internalised system that averages out a lot. That's my words, not yours. But some landowners would say, no, I want the cost of my subdivision. And I think we need to think about that.
All right, so councillors, with your permission, I'd like to draw the line under infrastructure because we do have some other parts of the business to get through as well. Very conscious of time. So thanks Brendan and Ruben and Thomas for joining us for that. And we'll now pass over to Grant and his team, who will be taking us through the river and catchment space. And I'll welcome Tane and Kerry up to the table as well.
Good tato, councillors. Yeah, I have Kerry Nelson and Tane Desmond here. Kerry's a principal catchment advisor. Tane looks after, is a team leader for the Waikato West Coast zones. And we also have online Deb Nickel, program lead for Upper Waikato Taupo, Chloe for Coromandel and Hauraki, Paul Smith, Waipa West Coast, and Paula Reeves, Waikato and Central. do have a couple of points to make before we get to the detail. Just referring to paragraphs 46 onwards in the attachment to your report, sets out the background and the sort of work that river and catchment work is all about. I'm not going to go through that. Fencing, planting, river management with machines doing major work on rivers, etc. But I will just highlight a couple of points. If you could go to the next slide, please. So there are there are a couple of points to make with the numbers that have been presented. So if you look in the chart there, and it's referred to in different pie graphs on the way through, catchment management and planning is 17.5 million. It's not 100% accurate. About 20% of that 17.5 million, the 3.8 million in that little chart there, relates to things you wouldn't consider catchment management and planning. So it provides for the labour costs and some of the direct costs in Waikato and Karakia zones and relating to flood protection and land drainage. This is just the nature of how the region is set up in zones, and the catchment management expenditure line picks up some oversight and other costs, labour costs, etc., in those other wider programs. There's also co-funding. There is co-funding money within our budgets, not for everything. Not all the Kanoa money is in our budgets, but money from MPI in terms of the Hill Country program, funding from the Waikato River Authority are included in our numbers. So, yeah, you need to understand that numbers are a little bit different in terms of catchments, rated costs for catchment management and planning kind of thing. Slide, please.
Just on that, are you comfortable with that spread of Waihao, West Coast? You know, are there areas where there's growth coming? Because I noticed the upper Waikato is very low at 1%.
So we could come back to that in a sec. Yeah. So just a couple of things which drive our program, just as reminders more than anything else. We have all our priority catchments and work based on science and modelling. Where's the best place to do the work? Where's the best benefit? What are the best kind of actions? All of our work is supporting landowners and others to reduce soil erosion, improve water quality, improve catchment resilience, channel capacity for rivers, and we do get biodiversity co-benefits of doing that work as a secondary thing most of the time. Most of the time it's secondary, sometimes it's more important than that. Catchment work and river management work is non-regulatory. It's all voluntary with farmers, but it is part of council's mandatory response to the freshwater requirements placed on council. So, I mean, I'm a bit of a stuck record on this one. People see it as perhaps as a discretionary activity, but it's part of a mandatory response. If you want to do less of this work, what would councils and the government do more of? Or regulation, or whatever it might be. But anyway, our work is closely aligned to the direction of the National Environment Bill. That's where the government's direction is less regulation and more other things. And we are one of those other things. We support a significant program of work where often we're putting in 35% for catchment work and 50% for river work. And a big portion of the work is funded by landowners and co-funders. So up on the board, and the last point there, say for example, we put $3 million into catchment work. By the time you add in co-funding and the landowners share, that's actually almost a $9 million program. Next slide, please. Kerry did a survey with landowners in the last 12 months, and some of the couple of key points that came out of it. Only 16% of landowners said they could have done the work without the funding support of council. It says with up there, but it's supposed to be without. So only a small portion would have done the work without our support. 100% of the landowners responded, said they would work with the council catchment team again. Majority of iwi entities Majority of iwi entities identified delivery of partnership projects as being significant enhancement of biodiversity and developing their skills, etc. The co-funding, the big co-funding parties, WRA, MPI, and so forth, they have got no way of spending their money in our region without it going through our council. There is no other mechanism to spend that money. So we pull together multiple funding streams and put them into packages which landowners can then access in a very efficient way. You guys are landowners, some of you imagine applying yourself for 3 different types of funding, trying to pull it together on your property, report separately back to whoever. It never happened. And yeah, that runs into the last point there. That's the next slide, please. There's only one more. The whole area of how we work with catchment groups is, a live topic at the moment. The government have got certain directions in this area. They're wanting to fund larger collectives and not small groups. And how our role with catchment groups develops is still formulating. There are significant opportunities to work with catchment groups to further freshwater and other outcomes. We are sitting on 3 applications for co-funding at the moment. Not sitting on, waiting for decisions. Another 4-year round with MPI for Hill Country, 2 for the WRA, 1 in Central and 1 in Lower. And we're expected to find out about those applications in the next couple of months. That's just a little introduction, but happy to take any questions you might have.
Ben?
Yes, so on item 56, which is your chart showing where the money is spent, are you comfortable with this at the moment, and where do you see the growth coming from?
Well, we're not in a growth phase, really. I mean, the last LTP was a steady state for us. We've not had growth in our LTP budgets for some years, and we're not proposing any growth in our LTP budgets for current round either. That just reflects the direction of the council and the current climate. We're just not coming to you with, we want more money for this or that, something else.
Right. Well, I guess you pointed out it's non-mandatory, so it's a user pays, but there seems to be at the moment a willingness on behalf of landowners to pay when they're requested, or the targeted rates are. Well, we don't seem to get pushback on the targeted rate.
Well, with your rates, you don't get much option to pay or not.
No.
But when we're asking for a direct contribution from farmers, that is a voluntary discussion. So the economics of farming has got a big part to play in whether we're doing a lot of work or pulling back in some areas.
Right.
If there's not enough money in sheep and beef farming, then they just close up the checkbooks, right. And it goes into a bit of a dip. The last year has been reasonably good for hill country farming. Yeah, so it's ability to pay.
Okay, so it's a fluctuating process. So yep.
Fluctuates a lot.
Yep.
Actually, from year to year and over 3-year cycles.
Okay, and just given that this is looking ahead in the LTP to a 3-year cycle, do you have any views, given all your work in the past, on how these sorts of functions will merge into what is possibly 2 unitaries? I mean, do you have any thoughts about how these things can let us go? Yes, you want to make a comment?
We're not, given there's so much water to go into that particular bridge, we're not looking at that at the moment. That's for us, that's 3 years down the line. And we're not looking at anything along that line at the moment.
Keith.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie. Thanks, Grant, for the update. And Liz and I had a session with them before, so that was very informative. Just in this chamber, we had a interface with CEDAM concerning the government's directive on unstable land. Just can you give us an indication of whether we're doing what we need to do without putting money into CEDAM and because you've got the hill country erosion thing. So just give us a bit of heads up on that, please.
Just before we go into that, Grant, so that's in relation to the CDM seeking funding for landslide risk assessment.
Yep.
Yeah, probably slightly different topics, I think. Some overlap, but I think it's more of a conversation actually between CDM and our resilience team that we need to consider that research.
No, I think it's more towards the resilient team coming next. Keith, is where you want to answer that question. Yep. Any others? No, carry on.
Oh, I'm done.
Aye.
Yeah. Yep. No, that was the intro.
One question we always get asked, and like when we went down to Country River Care, is just the compliance and all the stuff that it takes you guys to get. And I'm not, these rules come from where you're getting the funding from, I'd imagine, not from, but they're saying the compliance cost to getting work done is that actually, sure, it enables you to get funding, but it actually enables you to get stuff done really cheaply. And they when you're talking to the King Country River Care guys, they said they were better off getting there wherever they got that funding from, and then they were able to do it all in 2 hot wires, and they did this and that, and however they did it, and they got a lot more work done by going that direction than going in the direction we go in. So I'd like, if you could explain that a bit better.
Yeah, well, there's multiple parts to answering that.
I
try
can't
to
imagine
keep it
so.
short. One thing is about doing the right type of work in the best area for the result. And this is where we are using modelling and science. Catchment groups go wherever the landowner is keen to do something. It's a totally different approach. Okay. So yeah, you can build fences and plant things all over the landscape, make no difference, is one extreme example. But coming back to your point, fencing, differences in fencing standards often comes up. So a lot of farmers get by with 2-wire electric for dairy cows or whatever it might be. Our minimum standard for fencing is generally 5-wire electric, a 5-wire with 2 electric, or post and batten fencing. Unless it's in a floodplain, it's going to get smashed every year. So we have those sort of 3 options primarily. Our funders require those standards. So MPI and WRA require those standards. We don't want any of their money. Yeah, I don't think we would necessarily go to lower standards anyway, because we're planting thousands of dollars worth of native plants behind those fences. And that work is funded by ratepayers and others. It's not just the landowner's portion. There's cattle get in there and graze them all. What do you do when you just lost $20,000 worth of plants? Not going to get another go at that. So there are reasons why we have minimum standards. Fencing is the big one that comes up. The other one that comes up is, you spend the co-funding money on your admin and your labour costs. Well, that's completely wrong. Every dollar we get from co-funders goes into work. It's not funded, doesn't fund our overheads, if you like. So those are probably the 2 biggest areas where the misconceptions are. Yeah.
No, thank you for explaining that.
Gary might have an ad. John?
We've done sort of a science-based approach, as well as on-the-ground knowledge of where works should be, and the kind of the scale of the works required to achieve the outcomes that we're seeking is quite significant. I'd be very surprised if other organisations could do that scale of work and the landowners afford their share without that co-funding from MPI. For riparian, if people are wanting to do a few plants, and I'm not criticising what King Country River Care does, they've had incredible momentum, but we wouldn't generally fund works of that quite small scale per individual landowner. But if you're wanting to retire and a forest, tens of hectares, it's just unaffordable without that central government contribution. You're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Robbie. I just noticed in your chart, and for me, it's page 102, but it's page 35 for others, I think. Just that maintaining work that's already been done in some compartments in your highlight. Yeah, obviously, there's maybe a potential on Waikato and also Taupo. So are they likely to come back for looking for more funding because they can't afford to maintain it, or what's the issue? And surely there's a requirement there that they must. So sort of how do we deal with that, Grant? Just and what that might cost us. You'll need a microphone.
So we didn't meet our maintenance target for maintenance of previous work in terms of fences, and that's unusual. And it comes down to 3 large multi-trust properties around Taupō. So some of these properties are huge, and they might have 20, 30 different compartments on their properties. Now, where it skews the numbers, of course, if you have maintenance hasn't been done and you've got 2 or 3 properties across so many compartments, then yeah, this is how we've ended up not meeting our target slightly. So I don't think it's, well, what it is, it means we need to do more work with those trust properties to get their fences up to scratch. Generally speaking, we probably, well, not probably, we need to increase our inspection regime and maintenance of these historic areas right around the region. So that is a big topic. Most of the responsibility does fall to the landowners. It's their land and it's their stock and it's, you know, their areas to manage. Lots of landowners are doing work that we might fund. They just get on and do it as part of farm maintenance. We might have an advert.
Yeah, just through the chair, I was just going to add, but there is the landowner and us are legally obligated through the land improvement agreement to do that maintenance. So in order to remove that obligation, it has to be mutually agreed by both. So currently, we and them are required to do it. If they don't do it, we do have the ability to come in and do it and charge them, but there's been no appetite for that. We'd much prefer an educational, collaborative approach. But on the other hand, we also can't say that we will cut that budget unilaterally. Like we are obligated to pay it through in perpetuity or 999-year agreement for those schemes.
Okay, thanks for that clarity. Yeah.
Some of them are 99 years, some of them are some are 999.
Gary Raymer. Yeah, I think you've highlighted for me anyway a really big part of the problem when we look at deep dives and costs of things. And the fencing was a classic, and also some ways I'm going to shoot myself in the foot because I really like science and evidence, but I suppose I counter that because sometimes you know, the practical stuff on farm is trumps science in my mind, which me is a really crazy thing to say, but the fencing side of it is a big part of it, and you just your answers seem to be quite rigid in that. When I especially talk to some of the river care people, the reason why they can't work with WRC is because of that rigid requirement around the quality or the size of fencing, with their own understanding or knowledge of the land and what they want to do and the stock they want to keep out of there. They can do it for a fraction of the cost, and so we're not getting the buy-in, or if we are getting buy-in, we're spending a hell of a lot more money than what we need to spend just to get buy-in from the council. So, you know, I really think there's a big problem there with the lack of flexibility or lack of understanding of, I'd say, the experts in the field, which are the farmers. And it's driving cost.
Yeah. Yes, farmers are experts. We've got a farmer, we've got an ex-farmer. Yeah, I've worked on farms too. But yeah, I mean, it's something we would need to look at, I think, in the future around differences. I mean, there's also technology with halter coming for you know, restricting animals grazing into areas. We haven't gone down that route yet, and you know, we might be a late adopter if we do go down that route. But there are new technologies as well, so you don't need to fence every gully off.
Yeah, I was just going to add through the chair that we do have some flexibility. For example, understandably, farmers in high flood prone areas don't want to put up a 5-wire. And so we have to have flexibility then to go to a lesser number of wires, and we've done that quite frequently. And I think the other thing is we do go back and look at the results of previous work under the old 2002 Clean Streams, original Clean Streams programs. We only needed like a 1 or a 2 wire fence. When we go back and look at those compartments, there's not a lot left in terms of riparian vegetation within them. So we are also, as Grant said before, we're investing a lot in planting where planting is advantageous, and our 1 wire electric isn't going to protect those plants over the longer term. So yeah, understand that there is some cost implication, but covering that, you do have the likes of the Waikato River Authority and MPI paying a really large amount of that contribution in order to make it affordable for the landowners as well. But yeah, 3 wire in flood prone areas is common.
Questions? Move on then.
Thanks, team.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And we will now move on to our biosecurity and biodiversity program, and I'll welcome Patrick, Brett, and Natasha to take you through that. Patrick, do you have anyone online? Do you have anyone online, Patrick? No. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Right, we'll crack into it. I don't have any slides, so we'll get to questions as soon as we can. Few points though. Both programs are regional. They're not broken into any zones or anything like that. I think a lot of Grant's context was really helpful and is the same sort of, a lot of the framing is the same for these programs as well. So I'm not going to repeat that because it's, be working all with the same people. For biosecurity, our activities are both regulatory and non-regulatory, and they implement the regional pest management plan and the biosecurity strategy. We're part of a system. I've been in here before talking about this. We integrate both between the regions and nationally. So we're part of a wider system. For biodiversity, it's very similar to what Grant said, even though it's not sort of strictly regulatory, we are implementing the NPSIB and now RPS. We provide leadership, coordination, support landowners via information, advice and funding, exactly the same as how Grant explained it. If I can sum up one word what our programs are, it's collaborative. Like every single program we touch has multiple stakeholders and partners and landowners. Every single one, it's really complex. And there's a lot of co-funding that we receive and then co-funding that others receive as well. So again, it's very similar to Grant. We've provided a link to the annual reports from last year, and in a month you'll get the new ones at ICMC. And I think you're here to ask questions of us, so I will stop right there, and we're here to answer your questions.
Thank you, Patrick. We'll get straight into it. Ben's already got his light on, so thank you.
G'day, Patrick, and team. I note that biosecurity is 3 times the size of biodiversity, just in terms of your fund. 5 million versus almost 15. So just on that. Contracted services, I'm not sure whether that, but obviously it's about 95% contracted service. Nobody's expecting you guys to go out and actually do the possums and wood rocks and stuff like that. So the question there is, are you comfortable with the systems you've got in place to ensure contractor value for money?
Yeah, we are, and I guess as we've talked about already this morning, yeah, the processes are pretty robust, and we do, for our big programs, we routinely assess not only within this council, but we share across the whole network as well, network of regional councils around contractor pricing as well. So I'm pretty confident that we're doing it as best we can with the model we're running. So we made a conscious decision many decades ago to contract everything out, and that's what we do.
Cool. I just wanted to note some positives that number of the projects is actually, target was 20, you've achieved 39. That's positive. That the rats, you're hitting your target of 87%, but obviously this is seasonal because the previous year was 2.4. So obviously that depends on the number of rats that are around. Yep. Thirdly, possums, again, you're achieving, you've gone from 1.1 last time to 1.63. So you're hitting more possums than before. And then also just to bring you to the item 80, which is the innovative things you're looking at. So you've got a new app that basically gives all the current and previous data for contractors. You're looking at remote sensing drone technology. You're developing the innovative programs such as the Kaori that we've seen, the Weta Workshop one that won awards. And what I wanted to ask about is trialling of specific benthic sludge for sampling river substrate for curbicula. This is a question I'd only ever ask in this sort of context. If you want to comment on what that is, that's number 80. And also, again, go over Kite Taio about the community-led biodiversity projects, because that seemed to make a big difference to them, if you want to comment on those.
Sure, I can comment on the benthic sled. So it's used in the curricular program. So historically, we've used eDNA, which in a big river system doesn't always give you the best results. So benthic sled, think of it as it's like a scallop dredge. It goes through the sediment layer, and we'll filter out what it picks up. And if there's clams present, we that sediment. Not always, because it's not a perfect tool either, but slightly better at times than eDNA. Sort of complements the surveillance that we're doing with that eDNA work.
Is it something we've developed, or is it just right? Okay. And the Kite Taio?
Yep, that is a spatial program. We've had a couple of slides on it in our induction for you. It enables community groups to either use it in the field or when they're back in the office to record their projects, how many rats they captured, what their weed control, where they're going to do their planting in a map-based way, so very visual. We're getting fantastic feedback from the groups that are using it at the moment. We're still trialing it, we're still rolling it out, but really good feedback. They're loving the visual nature of it, the ease of use. So really happy with how that's progressing. Ultimately, we hope that will then, for the ones that are funded by us, it'll be available to anyone, not just groups that we fund, but ones that receive funding through the Natural Heritage Partnership Program. We will be able to reduce their reporting requirements because we'll be able to see their data through that program. So very promising.
Yeah, I know. One of the hard things of being those community things is actually having to write everything down and
that's right.
Submit it and be audited.
Yep.
Just two last questions. One is installation of remote monitoring of sites with cameras, if you want to talk to someone about what that will lead in the future. And secondly, management of curbicula and kalupa and the impact of inflation on the scope of management work. So it's just, are we taking those over from MPI and DOC, or what's the proposal with that? First one's the cameras, and then second.
Yeah, so we are starting to use camera traps to do more monitoring. They're a valuable tool. They can stay out in the field for months at a time and take a snapshot of what's going on in the field. Good example of where we're using was our wallaby program. We use them, pre and post aerial operations. Get a good idea for what sort of wallaby numbers we pick up on those cameras pre-control, and then we have a look at it. Post-control, generally see a massive reduction. Good little surveillance tools as well. Instead of having dogs out running around, thousands of hectares, we can just leave them in institute. They just do their jobs.
And curbicula and kalupa, who's going to look after it long term?
That's a good question. Yeah, so when a new pest gets into New Zealand, like unfortunately we have, we're going to have a continuous stream of them, unless we lock down the country, which I don't think we'll do. Yeah, so once a response is, I guess needs to move from can we eradicate it through to no, it's here for good. There needs to be a discussion with how do we manage it as a country. With some pests, there's an industry, say with Kiwi Vine Health, they pick up PSA, so they pick that up, they managed it. With the environment, we are the government industry body, I guess, together with iwi and the Department of Conservation. So I guess I'm flagging that there needs to be a discussion around how do we fund that if we want to fund it. Because at the moment I'm covering it out of my reserve, which is not a sustainable long-term approach to supporting the community manage these things. And there's a massive expectation that we do take a leadership role. If you look through the Biosecurity Act, it's pretty clear what our role is. We are kind of the operational arm in the regions. MPI don't have the staff to do it. Yeah.
So just a question there. Are we anticipating something in the long-term plan around that?
Probably leave that up to Greg to answer rather than me.
Right.
Yeah, so at this stage, so the executive has considered areas for investment to bring to yourselves in September. We're given some quite tight fiscal expectations around that, and so these two aren't included in that so far. But look, I think awareness is really important because, like many of our programs, we do work closely with members of the community, and there are expectations that can be placed on us. Obviously, it comes down to our means, what we can provide within our existing resources, and whether council wishes to invest more or not. So it's an important discussion, and even if we choose not to invest, it's important for council to have an awareness of where those pressures are coming to bear.
Finish, Ben?
Thank you. Chris?
Thanks, Robbie. Can I just ask, do you people work with the Hamilton City Council inside the city boundary for approximate matter eradication or not?
We don't have a program like we have out in the rural areas, but we do work collaboratively with them, and there's a lot of community groups that are supported. Yeah, and a few priority sites in our gullies. Yeah,
the answer is you don't. Okay. The reason
no, it's a yes. It's different from our priority biodiversity program, though.
So are you aware that they've got a very elaborate reporting system? It's interactive. So
Yes.
As soon as they catch a possum, it comes up on lights where it is, where the traps are. So are we doing the same thing as they're doing? Like, I hope we're not replicating, because I had this question last time. Several sites that seem to be doing the same thing, which means we're wasting money, or somebody's wasting money.
Yeah, the Nature in the City program has quite a different focus than our programs, which, as Patrick said, are those regional scale programs. We are aware of, we do work with Hamilton City Council on that. We do provide funding, as Patrick said, to community groups and on the priority biodiversity site. So that's to landowners in the city with, say, gully sections that have high biodiversity values. So yes, we do. The Keti Taio program does similar but different things. And it's quite an intensive program that they're doing through that Nature in the City, far beyond our budgets.
Okay, thank you.
Liz.
Yeah, look, just wanted to sort of make sure that councillors are aware that obviously with our strategic focus on the economy and the drivers that we have in that space now, that some of our guests arriving into the country have a massive impact on our economy. I don't want to be too pointed here, but some of the topics of conversation we may not be funding some areas could drastically affect tourism, for example, in some of our waterways. It can affect a whole bunch of things, and I just want councillors to be really aware of what's actually happening in that space at the moment. And if you're not aware, please come and talk to me, and I can let you know. What are some of the long-term impacts that new pests and things can have that will affect some of the income and the tourism benefits that we currently have at the moment, but it could be seriously compromised.
Can I just?
I want to add it to that. I think totally agree with what you're saying there, Liz. But I think when we were doing I think it was our natural heritage funding, or through one of those papers we were dealing with, possum control came up. And it was more about why can't there be more targeted rate for possum control or pest control, where some areas in the Waikato are receiving general rate money to control pests, and others where they want pest control can't get it, because I'm one of them. You won't fund any of my pest control down on the Hauraki Plains, but you'll fund pest control somewhere else. So the question I bring to you guys is, I think areas that are requiring pest control, there should be ability for targeted rates to be collected to help do that. And I think that's where Chris wants to go as well, that others aren't totally subsidising one group to get pest control. Because pest control is required everywhere, like Liz is saying, and it's not to stop it, it's to enhance it. Yeah. So thank you. I think you want to add to that, Chris?
Yeah, look, Robbie, and I thank you for raising that last week, because I spent some time on the weekend actually putting a spreadsheet together, analysing it.
Yeah.
And it's very illuminating. So I've sent it straight to Janine and said, how do we deal with it?
And I think this comes to actually plant procurement as well. That's another thing Chris has brought up as well. No, it's not, but where we can resource plants way cheaper from other organisations, but they're not taken into account. So anyway, that's something else we're working with in another place. But is anyone, Ben, you got something to add?
Well, yeah, I was just going to say, Liz, I heard what you had to say, but I wondered if you had something more to add to that, because it seemed like you were talking around the topic. Are you advocating something for the long-term plan, or something that needs to be done that's going to impact on our economy and our tourism that we should be looking at?
Oh, look, I think staff know what I'm talking
But
about.
I don't.
In particular,
I don't know.
I can talk to you about it later. But
It's
you know,
secret, no.
it's really important that we've got a long-term view here. And as we've got new biosecurity risks, that we look at what are the long-term impacts of that. I know we don't have the funding, but sometimes you've got to play a longer game. So I want everyone around this table to be fully aware of not funding some programs and what impact that might have to our tourism businesses, or any other type of, other things that are going on. So
Yeah.
I think we can get into specific examples later, but I just think there's risk here.
And I think what you're bringing up is a good point, because we're told not to talk about unitaries, but this is one area that unitaries aren't going to matter, because it's going to cross borders and do whatever it wants. So this is that somewhere in the management of this organisation, whatever happens with this organisation in the future, this discussion is going to be going on out in those unitaries, talking how to control biosecurity anyway, because it's, yeah. Warren, were you going to add something or not? No. Gary. Raymond, sorry first.
Yeah, both of a bit like Chris Hughes with his nuclear power, but mine is about GE, and we just manage these things, and whether we could keep pushing, some government for modification, but also on the funding side of it, you all talk about targeted rates and everything else. My position is that we should be pushing central government for more of this too, because farmers, if you like, for the possums or even the ratepayer, we never brought these pests in. We never let them through our border, but we're asked to pay for the eradication of them. And I'd say we should try and drive home more, and with a stronger voice. The responsibility was around border security. It was not our problem. There was a central government problem, and so they should fund it. And so whether, and for me, from a farmer, Mycobovis, we paid 50% of the eradication of Mycobovis, but we didn't let it in, and it wasn't out, and PSA is another one. And so I think I'd like to see a lot more emphasis on shooting home where the responsibility lies, and that's the central government, not with us.
Good luck, but I agree. There is something coming out in the next month or so that may make you smile with that. But anyway, No. Gary Raymond, Maguire, please.
Patrick, do you have any information on if there's any work being done and if there's any information on the spread of the koi
Spread of what, sorry?
carp? No, but how,
Bingo.
whether the spread is actually, are you putting any work into?
Yeah,
Is
so
it
our
monitoring the
key
spread?
priority is to try and contain it to the current distribution. So that's and the same with the Department of Conservation. So that's an area where we are working. You know, that's where we push most of our advocacy and engagement work. Check, clean, dry, all that sort of stuff, and our monitoring as well. So make sure that they're not getting into other lakes or further up the river.
But monitoring, is there any monitoring, like to make sure they don't get into Lake Taupo, for example, and destroy the trout?
Yep, that would be. Yep, that would be. Try and stop them from moving south. Yep.
Any idea how far south they've gone and how far north they've gone? And
Yeah, pretty good idea. They're in the Waiho rivers. They're north of they're not north of, sorry, upstream of Karapiro. And not in Northland. Well, they're in Northland, but they haven't expanded in Northland. So yeah.
The lower North Island,
3, yeah.
the odd pocket. And
So
not in the South Island.
the incursion into Karapiro was the biggest range expansion last 5 years.
so any idea roughly how they could have got into Karapiro?
We know exactly how they got into Karapiro.
Someone
Introduced.
put them in there.
Yeah, it was a maintenance accident when they shut off the overflow. They swam up into the lake. Yeah, because the diver saw them swim past them when they were in the overflow pipe.
Commercial opportunity.
You'll see more soon.
Rightio. Giant goldfish.
Note I'm online. Kia ora, just note I'm
Oh.
online with my hand up.
Yeah, Tipper, Noel's got his and then you're up.
Well, I'm just not sure what Liz is alluding to insofar as when we had the clams, staff got brought into secret meetings, were told not to talk with councillors, and the word slowly got out, and because other people were connected to other organisations, we knew about it before we were officially told. So if there's something going on about organisms and otherwise, that, so, you know, I'm not sure whether there's secret squirrels going on here or not, but.
No, look, not at all, Noel. So I'm just trying to highlight that, and I'll be a bit more pointed then. So the gold clam is going to devastate the events, you know, all along the Waikato River from Taupo, Hamilton, obviously Karapiro, all of that. I mean, event hosts will move away. It will become at some point untenable to host anything there.
What was interesting, Bobby and I were somewhere the other day with Mike Peters, and he runs the water intake for Tikawara, and the district council takes the water from them for the community. But they've got their 7 inlets out in the middle of the river, and he was out there, and
They're in midstream too. They're not on the bottom or the top or anywhere.
midstream in the water flow. And there's just on the 7 screens, there were just masses and masses. So just in the flow of the water. Not attached to the, so there's millions of them just floating down.
Yeah, Tipper, please.
Kia ora, just on a different angle, but could staff assure us that within the LTP we look for opportunities, not unlike what Councillor Hughes was saying, who else has a common interest to us to see some of this work done, and are we collaborating at the most efficient way? Knowing that no one's got enough money to do any of this, but some other groups have some limited mandate or interest in it. And I just want to make sure there's enough scope to bring that back in LTP discussions too. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Tipper. Any other questions?
No, that brings that activity to a close. So thanks, Patrick, Natasha, and Brett.
Thank you.
Helpful discussion. Look, last but not least, we have our our emergency response and resilient development activities. So welcome, Dave, and I see Emily's here as well.
So,
You
thank you.
get 15 minutes for lunch.
This is our smallest program, but it's also a really important one. A lot of profile in the community, and it's obviously front and center when it comes to our emergency responses. So, hey, Greg, just one other thing before I run away. In the back of the report, there is we are going to be bringing a business case through to review our regional pest management plan because the Biosecurity Act has been reviewed, and the national policy direction is also being reviewed, which will trigger a review, but it's not going to be for a little while. But all right, thank you.
Thanks, Patrick.
Thanks, Patrick.
All right, Dave.
Yeah, morning, councillors. I've only got 2 slides, so hopefully more time for questions. We'll move on to the first slide, please. Quick summary, and I know we had an in-depth session last week, so I won't spend too much time on it, but just a reminder around the 2 groups of activities, emergency management and resilient development. They do work hand in glove, although I'm depicting them as separate. Emergency management office, 3 people fulfill those roles. So first role is essentially driving the council's response. So that means training and coaching and exercising are the key activities there. In terms of marine oil spill, we are responsible for quite an extensive amount of coastline, and we have tier 1 responsibilities. So that means inspecting sites around the region. We also have a responsibility to respond to the events themselves. Obviously, we're highly reliant, given only 3 people in that team, on a large proportion of staff across the whole of council. And they are regularly exercised. We have to do 2 exercises per year. All of this activity is funded through general rate. We have a very small amount of money coming back from Maritime New Zealand. I think recently they reduced the amount that they were giving in terms of covering labour costs, and now they only cover direct costs, which essentially is relatively little. It's really just to cover the exercises. We do carry a lot of equipment on their behalf, and they do cover some of that cost. And then, of course, we also support the wider Waikato civil defence emergency management response. So that's both in terms of direct logistic support and intel support, particularly in the marine, coastal science perspective and flood response. So that's emergency management. Resilient development, slightly bigger team of 7, and we primarily are there for provision of science and technical information. So obviously responding to requests for information around natural hazards, particularly in respect of consents and planning applications. I would note we've had a significant increase since the storm events this year have driven a lot of additional response, particularly communities that are more concerned about flooding. We've had over 450 public requests for information. Some of those requests, they used to take about half a day. Now they're taking up to 2 or 3 days to respond to, given the depth of technical information that people are asking for. So the demand on this team is growing ever more exponentially. This year and through the course of this LTP, we've had the opportunity to run the Natural Hazard Resilience Programme. That obviously is impacted by the weather events because this team largely supports the flood response activity as well. So the delivery of that programme has been challenging, as we mentioned, but we've largely managed to deliver most of that. Of course, we support a wide group of the community, particularly TAs and civil defence. And we also provide a lot of community support in terms of just general technical information. We can't do it alone. We obviously work very closely with science teams. We work very closely with our spatial teams as well. So it's a collective effort to really bring the hazard information to the region. Little plug at the bottom there. I did forget the dollar figure, but $1 spent on this activity creates about $4 value. So it's a significant statistic, I guess, to bear in mind that this is quite a fundamental investment that we make.
Next slide, please.
Was that 4?
4. I think, and again, as we suggested last week, there are a number of challenges ahead, notwithstanding the legislative and government reform. Our resilience framework, once we get to the point of adoption, then there will be a lot of work to do to actually implement that. We've also got a lot of technical hazard information available, but again, the demand for that is growing tremendously. The water resource modelling is a particularly key function that we provide. And I guess as TAs begin their journey of adaptation planning, they're going to require more and more detailed information and support for interpretation of impacts. Flood warning capabilities. Sorry, should we take the question?
It's up to you guys. If you, how many more slides you got?
Oh, this is it.
I'll speak through that and then Tipper can ask you a question.
I mentioned flood warning capability. Obviously, we're beginning to use more and more technology to give us understanding of not just the amount of rain that's falling, but specifically where it's falling, and to use information on the amount of water we already have in the catchment to try and determine what the impact of that is. So our flood warning capability is growing, and obviously we're investing in telemetry. We're working with the science teams to find the right places to put telemetry to get that information through as effectively as possible. Emergency management readiness, I won't talk too much more about that, or marine oil spills. Obviously climate change, particularly with planning and consent applications. We're having to spend more time working through what the specifics are going to look like for each location. So climate change and the impacts of severe weather events certainly is becoming kind of a core trade of ours. We do have some contracted specialist service, again, where we don't have in-house capability. We've grown our in-house capability, particularly in this last 12 months in the modelling space. So we've trained 3 people to do the modelling work that we would have otherwise sent outside. So where we see an opportunity, we'll bring that work in-house, but obviously capacity is quite an issue. And of course, being part of that national direction and reform, we do expect there to be some impacts there, depending on what is expected of us as a council to support the adaptation planning. So quite a lot happening in the future space, some of it not very clear at the moment, I have to say, and I guess we'll see more coming months. Other than that, that's as much as I plan to talk through. To take questions.
Thank you. Tipper, you're the first up. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate the summary. Probably what I would like to know for the LTP, it's a pretty similar question, what we're funded to do, how far we can stretch that, but there's an increased public scrutiny on our preparedness. And I just think we can't keep saying that the government settings haven't changed if we're not actually hazard mapping and communicating that, because the new public awareness and heightened awareness around these things means that this is the area I think that will draw most scrutiny in the LTP. So just look forward to your feedback through the LTP. Don't require a response today. Kia ora.
So I could provide you with some assurance, Councillor. So there's 2 elements that will be considered through the LTP. One is that ELT have asked for an independent review of our emergency management responsibilities and where we're at relative to capability. So that information will be coming back in due course, and that will be highlighted in your workshop. Probably not the actual outcome of the review, but that will be a point of discussion. And the other element is, so you have considered the regional resilience framework that will be going to council end of the month. And again, it's signposted as a area that we will talk to you about in September, about a possible business case to consider what we can currently achieve within existing resources versus what additional investment might look like.
Appreciate. Thank you.
Ben.
You guys are a bit like the mouse that roared. I look here and it's a very small amount of money. I would know that with Emily, but it's a small amount of money, but you're in our heads every time a storm comes through. You guys operationalize, and it looks like a much bigger operation than the amount of money that's spent here. So apart from the oil spill preparation, there's all the work that goes into the flood monitoring, et cetera, and I see you've got 95%, response rate, that, customer happiness with that. My question then is, how do you link with CDEM? And because CDEM has now come back and is asking us for another $1.9 million. Obviously the TAs don't pay for that anymore. It all comes on our rates bill, but that's a significant rate increase. And yet this emergency management issue is important to people, particularly with changes. So I don't know if you can answer that question or if you can understand what I'm trying to ask there.
I can try. How do we link? We obviously work with them in terms of helping develop the group plan. Obviously, we're not part of the approval process there. It's the KEG that approves that plan. I did note when I read the LTP proposal for their increased spend that there was an element of spend that was devoted to natural hazards and science information, which I found a bit peculiar. That's one area that we're going to need to have a talk about, I think. Okay. But I think other than that, our main response to CDM is providing surge staff. So we train our staff internally to a certain level. We rely on civil defence to do the next 2 levels of training. When TAs operate in an emergency setting, particularly with Baianu, recently we found ourselves predominantly the key support for civil defence because most of the surge staff were taken up through their own need. So Otahonga, Waipa, Hamilton City, etc. They used all of their own staff and couldn't provide civil defence with the level of support that they needed. So we are really key to their activity. And obviously, yeah, absolutely. With technical aspects, we have a science function, but we have a lot of in-depth knowledge about flood response and flood activity within the region. So obviously we provide technical information. So we're really key to that. Not sure if that answers.
So and the question sitting in there is, given the climate change, if you exclude the CDM out, is the budget sufficient and what are the demands coming? And we will see that presumably in the LTP.
Yeah, as Greg mentioned, we're going to take a close look at the emergency management response. What are we capable of and what are the risks given the nature of the emergency management bill? Yes, put different expectations on us. With the climate change amendment bill, we'll see potentially increased demand for adaptation planning support. We need to understand better what that looks like. We can anticipate that we will need to put more resource in, is my simple answer. I think in the resilience space, we'll certainly see with spatial planning and generally in support of territorial authorities' activities. They'll need close support technically to make sure they make the right decisions around development. And we've had a number of cases this year where we've had to step in and be quite assertive around the development decisions that the TAs are making. So that's an area that I think will grow in demand.
And the other question that came up, and obviously you mentioned a comment, but the 24-hour nature of the demands on your staff at times when there's a major flood going through that, well, like Otahonga, which nobody expected, and suddenly it's there and there's people drowning, and so it's is that been resolved, or is it still sitting there as an issue?
No, that's still part of the review. I guess we're seeing a pattern now of increased frequency of response. We're also seeing signals from civil defence that they will stand up earlier. So we'd expect to stand up a lot earlier in events. So when we forecast a big rain event, we'll be active in the emergency response space much quicker. Probably be active longer, given the nature of these events, and that will increase demand. So it's not resolved. We'll see hopefully an outcome from this emergency management review. That I guess will tell us where we need to go from here.
Emily, yeah.
And just add, Mr. Chairman, thank you for your questioning. A couple of things. One, in terms of our team and in that response in the 24 hours that you noted, I guess we've I'm almost reluctant to say this out loud. We've had a period of reprieve where the gods have been a bit kinder lately. And so that has allowed our teams to catch their breath. And a big focus for me in coming into this role was around getting people back on a bit more of an even keel, because as you know, there's been some health and safety and wellbeing discussions in regards to this team. So that's been a real focus, and the team are in a good place at the moment. I just want to kind of make sure we're really clear. There are two different teams. So we have so as a result of the restructure, or it might have been after that, the Regional Resilience and Emergency Management, Dave made a smart move, and he separated those into two teams. Emergency Management, a lot of their team's focus is on that capacity and capability building within the organisation, and to encourage that support to be it surge staff, but also in terms of our own response function. So you will have heard us talk about RFCs and all those fun roles. So that team really are leading the charge and trying to increase the number of people that we've got in that space. And we're seeing some really positive steps, which is fantastic, because from my regional resilience lens, that will start to have some benefit in terms of creating a bit more breathing space for my regional resilience team, because a lot of the burden sits on them for those regional roles. They also wear other hats, and that they're there as subject matter experts, be it land instability, flood impact, other sort of natural hazard risk, or they might also be involved in marine oil spills. So sometimes it's which hat are they wearing and how many hats are they wearing at any one time. So the regional resilience team has a very strong technical lens. So it's made up of engineers. That's where we're leading the regional modelling work through, as well as natural hazard experts. So you've kind of got like a science tech team within ICM, and then you've got the emergency management team. And we do, as Dave noted, go hand in glove, but some of the function is a little bit different. So regional resilience has a very strong relationship with the likes of Spatial and Tracy's team and wider teams in SPY.
But just to clarify, item 87, emergency response is a total spend of 0.9 million. Resilient development, which is your regional resilience, I guess, is 1.9 million. So the overall is still less than 3 million.
Yeah. I think my operating budget is 400,000 a year.
The mouse that roared, so yeah.
And hence we've noted around some of the innovation in there. We're looking at how we can do things with the resourcing we've got, how we can do things smarter.
Dave, institutional knowledge is the word you were after before.
Thank you.
Yeah.
If I can, because there was some questioning earlier about the civil defence application and the land instability. So Grant's team obviously would be in addition to those discussions, because I have a very strong belief that if we are developing science, we need to be working with those who will implement it. So we have reached out after the discussions and questions. Rick reached out to Vicky at CDM to understand what has been planned in that space better. And I guess it sounds like they use the land instability as an example of where we have information gaps. But we do have some technology that can potentially support some of that too. And again, the Spatial team are doing some fantastic work with using satellite imagery post-event to look at where we've got land instability issues. So we're continuing that conversation. So just wanted to give that confidence that we are stalking civil defence and seeing what we can find together.
Thank you. Gary.
There's some strong questions around this table here on our decision over the road at civil defence that I was involved with as chairing it for a regional council side. That comment, David, that you said that there was when it came to that extra funding and the money, you may have already answered it here now already, but just my question was just whether you could share any of that thought pattern,
possibly.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I guess it
or if it is suitable for this table here, because the ones around here will be asking those questions. So if it is, that's what I thought. So, anything to add or not?
I mean, I think when government issued the instruction for civil defence to better understand land stability and back with the response how they were going to do that, that's what's triggered the proposal. I thought it was a little bit odd, just one aspect of it in respect of the science information. Regional Council already has a lot of that information available. There is information that we don't have available, and we're curious as well. I guess the question for Council is where does that effort come from? Does it come from within Regional Council function or civil defence? Well, I can't answer that question. I think it was about 100k of the proposed increase was allocated to that one particular issue. So, is it a big deal? I'm not sure. But I do think we need clarity, and I've raised this in the flood response reports that I've given to ELT. But we do need to think carefully about what our role is with that particular aspect. So land stability is one that I think has got a big question mark over it.
Thank you. Tipper?
Kia ora, Mr. Chair, just rather than having to, I'm wondering how we can ask through the CE that he bring the strategic alignment of that work through. I don't want to listen to two different teams of ours bid for this, for a common space. I'd rather someone work up the strategic imperatives that we need to mind in terms of risk and resilience. It'll be easier than considering this in the LTP and then considering CDM's ask. I know it comes from a different mandate, but somebody's got to do the work to align. And I just want to make sure that we're giving the right, I guess, guardrails to Chris and expectation that that comes through aligned. Thank you.
I can respond to that through you, Mr. Chair. So there's really two questions that will be prepared for when you consider this in September. Number one, is there any overlap with what CDM is seeking with the work that we're already doing? And number two, who's the right part of council to actually be doing it? Should it rest with civil defence? Should it rest with our hazards team? Should it rest somewhere else? And so I believe that should help you to understand what civil defence is looking for versus what we might be looking for in other parts of our program.
I'm just concerned.
Yeah, well, this is it. I don't want a versus. I want an alignment. I want a strategic purchase here. I don't need to weigh up between the two imperatives. I would like the best case scenario for council to be operate in the most functional way around regional risk and resilience. I know both of you hold some of the mandate, but I'm asking Chris to bring that together seamlessly for us. Thank you.
I think we heard from one of you, maybe Dave, a few moments ago, that government, the minister, has directed CDM to look at it. So the mandate is with CDM. I think the regional council has a place in supporting that. But this, you know, if the minister said CDM, well, that's CDM. And therefore...
Well, that's okay, but we're being asked for the money, councillor. We're being asked.
Yeah, what we're being asked, and look, I'm meeting with Julian Wednesday, because I thought this discussion didn't get off to a good footing insofar as, and we're crossing over, CDM is the mayors of our TAs and the chair of this organisation, or their delegate. Those delegates, ours is Gary to go, and they have the responsibility and the delegations of their council to commit council to funds and some time ago, they asked that this council rate on behalf of the region for the regional functions. That's what they've done, and they've brought that proposal to us. All the business cases and everything else went through CDM group, and Gary would have been part of that. And as a result, we are here to undertake that commitment that this council made some years ago to rate.
I'm agreeing with you.
So just hang on.
I'm agreeing with you.
Hang on. We have got to understand what the function of our role in this is that they've done the business case. They've got the authority to commit us on our behalf. We're being asked to do this.
what we've got to make sure, and this is where I agree with Sipper, is the alignment, and I think we're all on the same page. Is that if civil defence has been asked to take the lead by the minister, our role is to support but not duplicate and make sure we get the work done. That's in my view.
We're saying, Noel, is that work will most probably not be done by civil defence. It will be done by a contractor. And that knowledge then should be held by us if we wish to do that work for them. That's what we're trying to get through our head. We're not saying to take the work off them. We're saying if this information is to be gathered, we've got this group here, our resilient group that's out there working in that space all the day. They know where to go to get the data from Geotech and other organisations to put it in an understanding of where the risk is. Why wouldn't we support this group to then go and get some consultants that know nothing about the work they're trying to accomplish and get it done? That's what we're trying to have the discussion about. Yeah.
Yeah, but I got a point. I wonder, should Noel be visiting and meeting with Julian without the chair of our group going with him?
Yes, I should.
Yep.
Well, you should invite at least the chair of the group.
Right.
Shouldn't be having
Anyway,
private conversations.
I think we've gone. This meeting is not about civil defence. This is about resilience. and so, is there any other questions to Emily or Dave? Thank you.
All right, thanks, Greg. All right, Mr. Chair, thanks, Dave and Emily, and that brings our ICM deep dive to a conclusion. Thank you all. It was a good discussion, and look for me. There are a few points in the different activities, but there's clearly a much larger interest in the infrastructure space, and I've got a few actions to take away to bring back more detail to you. I'll need to identify, what's the means for that, whether it's a meeting, a workshop, or something else. But otherwise, I hope it's been insightful for you. You can see that we cover a lot of areas. We deal with a lot of issues. We have a complex funding arrangement, complex budgets. I guess my job here is to try and unpick that for you, take your questions away from today and provide you the information that you need.
I just want to say it was a good report. It was very detailed. It was good. You could break down stuff.
Good reports. Thank you.
Right now, you've got another two deep dives coming up. So time for a break, and I won't cut a queue to finish the session. We'll leave that to the end of the day.
Yeah, let's break for lunch. Thank you. Angela.